Hi, welcome to Color Quest. This is Margaret Byrd, and I'd like to welcome you to my back porch. I have been enjoying a summer of beautiful weather here in the Pacific Northwest, spending lots of time walking in the woods and enjoying what is maybe one of the quintessential flora in this part of the world, and that is the fern. In the last video, we looked at fern for botanical printing, and to be honest, we didn't get that great a result. So I thought, why not give it another go? But this time, play around with the magic of iron in tannin and see if we can't get some sharper prints on paper. So I want to just put it out there that I'm super sorry. I've been a bit absent the past few months and not quite consistent in posting videos. I have been traveling a lot, and I also moved. So it's been a little more challenging for me to have videos ready for you every single week. Hopefully we'll see some improvement in that. But this week, I thought it would be great to take another look at fern. Fern itself is a plant that can produce color in the dye pot. I have a video where we looked at that. It produces a really pretty sort of orangish and neutral color. And last week we tried it along with some other leaves in a botanical print that we put into the oven. Now the mordant that we used in that particular video was an alum mordant, and we did play around a little bit with adding some iron pieces for interaction with whatever tannin may be in the leaves that we looked at. But fern is notoriously low in tannin on its own, so I wanted to see if we couldn't push it a little bit by introducing tannin and iron as both a mordant and a modifier to use in a sort of dye blanket, if you will, type of process. We worked with paper last week, and I want to keep looking at that. A lot of people out there enjoy paper in their different creative practices, and it's a really great way to learn about botanical printing and to be testing some things without going straight to fiber-like fabric. Now, of course, anything we do here with paper, we can also do with fabric. We've had many a video looking at that, and most recently, we took a look at how we could enhance eucalyptus on different kinds of fiber like silk and cotton using some of the same tricks, if you will, and that is the tannin and iron combination. So, let's go grab some ferns out in my local forest and play around with it in the botanical printing way and see if we can't get some sharper prints this time. Found two different types here. One is a sword fern, the other looks to be a lady fern, and they're different enough that I thought they would make a beautiful contrast in any of the printing we do today. Now, with all these, you have a top and a bottom, and the type of process we're going to do today will be able to capture both. And this time on paper, hopefully it'll be pretty easy to see. Now, one thing with fern is that it's pretty delicate, and it also can dry up pretty quickly. So the first thing I'm going to do is put the small pieces that I've plucked and put them into water. And that's just to keep them wet while we work. I'm going to be soaking the leaves themselves in two different mordants or modifiers, as well as the paper that we're going to be using. And we'll see if we can't mix and match and create some differences and hopefully some really strong prints. Now, the paper that I'm going to use is watercolor paper. It can stand both the wetness of being submerged in water, as well as the heat that we're going to subject it to in the steam pot. So I just happen to have some greeting cards, so it actually makes for a really beautiful sandwich that I can make where we can be getting both that top and bottom print. The tannin that I'm going to be using today is an oak gall tannin, which is one of the most popular tannins out there in the natural dyer's world, and I happen to have a batch already made. You can reuse your mordants, and if you store them properly, they can become the starter mordant for another run. Therefore, since I'm not looking to be super precise with my percentages, I just grabbed the jar that I found in my garage that was labeled with 10%, and that's what I'm going to use. You may also see something referred to as gallo tannin, and that is also extracted from oak galls, and they are a fantastic tannin source. So for iron, I'm going to be using ferrous sulfate. And this is something that I can buy from online retailers like Botanical Colors, or in this instance, I'm using one from Mewa, which is an online store in Canada, and they have some incredible products as well as some beautiful fibers. So if you haven't looked at them, I've left their website information in the description below as well. So when you're working with iron, a few things to remember. One is you do not want to mix and match with other things you might be using in your dye studio. So pick your utensils and so forth and keep them used just for your iron. I have a bowl that I've earmarked for iron, and you've seen it in a million videos here. And I'm also going to protect my surfaces by putting down a towel, because iron can interact with things like tannin and stain. Because it's in a powder form, before I dissolve it in water, you're going to want to wear a mask so you don't breathe in any of the dust, and you will want to use gloves. It can be irritating to the skin. Iron's quite strong. We don't need much. In this instance, I'm only going to be putting in 1/8 of a teaspoon. I'm going to dissolve the iron in some hot water, and then I'm going to add more water to the bowl so that I can submerge my leaves and paper. All right, now I have both my baths ready, and I'm going to go ahead and soak the leaves and the paper in both of them. And I'm going to let them sit in there for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I'm hoping to boost the tannin content on the leaves as one way of maybe enhancing the prints, and maybe by adding them to iron, they will also interact in a really different and beautiful way. So let's get those things soaking, and then we can start building our stack of prints. All right, we're going to be building this stack one on top of the other, and in order to try to keep the prints nice and crisp, I'm going to be using parchment paper as a barrier in between each one of my watercolor cards. I'm going to be building these in between 2 ceramic tiles, lovingly made by my children when they were much younger, and they are now part of my studio. And I'm going to want to bind them tight together. I have clips that I'm going to try to use. You can use rubber bands or string or even long pieces of fiber that you can tie. The point here is to tighten it as best we can in between those 2 heavy ceramic pieces. I'm hoping that we're going to get some nice tight surfaces, which can certainly help with botanical printing.
Rode out the morning on the saddle of my porch. Some leaves are still green, yet some other ones got scorched.
I am washing my hands in between going into and out of the tannin and iron, and that is because I could easily contaminate either one of those baths by introducing iron to the tannin or tannin to the iron, or creating an iron-tannin reaction when I don't want it.
I'm not sure why sometimes it feels like they sneak up from behind, and if they do stay, it toughens up my mind just like a huge wave on a greater tide. The minutes are a symbol of my impatience, waiting for someone to convince me I've made it. Repeating actions, hoping something changes them, but every direction seems to go against the wind. It's a blue day, and I'm not sure why. Sometimes it feels like they sneak up from behind, and if they do stay, it purifies my mind just like a cool wave on a raging tide. To justify if I'm sleeping or if I am open wide. It ain't too different, it's a really skinny line between feeling distant and feeling so sublime.
When things don't go as planned, you have to improvise, and in this instance, my clips did not fit. No problem. Just grab some rubber bands and use those, and made a nice tight bundle across those ceramic tiles.
Like a blue wave beneath a changing sky.
Now with leaves, you're going to want to give them at least 2 hours in the steam. As a matter of fact, after about 2 hours, I'm just going to turn the stove off, and I'm going to let them sit and cool in the pot itself. We will do that, check on it tomorrow, and see what beauty is revealed.
To justify if I'm sleeping or if I am open wide. It ain't too different, it's a really skinny line between feeling distant and feeling so sublime. It's a blue day, I'm not sure why. Sometimes it feels like they take me by surprise, and if they do stay, it opens up my mind just like a new wave on an ancient tide. Just like a blue wave beneath a changing sky.
All right, wow, I am so excited by the results. We got some really crisp prints, and they're all so different. Let me know what you think. Everything's dry, it always dries lighter. Here is the last one, tannin soaked paper and iron soaked fern. And the prints themselves are defined but light, but we got some really beautiful details in the design of the fern itself. And you can see whether it was on the top or the bottom, it came out differently, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it this way. Because you can see that the moon side and the ground side really do make a difference, and how different these two various fern types are. And look at that, you can see the tiny little dots that are on the bottom of the sword fern, which is part of their seeding process or reproductive process. And it's really cool that you can see those so clearly. So I do love as well too that you're really getting that orange color, which is similar to the color that I got in the dye pot when I used fern. I'm going to skip to the opposite, and that is where we had iron soaked paper, and the fern itself was put into the tannin. And you can see that adding that extra tannin really did make a difference. And wow, they look so different from the opposite, right? So we have this beautiful darker color, maybe more defined, at least in terms of the depth of color, but it's not quite as clear as the other ones we just looked at, but really still incredibly detailed and really lovely in terms of the darkness. You can see a little bit of those under dots and so forth, but it's not quite as clear. But the darkness of the tannin soaked leaves on top of the iron soaked paper, or iron blanket in this instance, really is different and beautiful in its own way. I'm going to save this one for last because this is where we mixed the two different kinds of paper together in one print. So here we have the iron paper that's here, and then we had the tannin paper here. Again, there are those beautiful dots. And here with the tannin in the background and the more golden color of the fern, it's very similar to what we saw in the first one, but it's really fun to see how different you can create prints with the same leaf. So we're getting two very different effects. And then let's look at this other one for the different fern style. It's a little bit more subtle. And again, we have this being the iron paper and vice versa here. So again, lighter, but really pretty. This color difference, I just love. Look at the detail in that branch, and all of this is just really, really pretty. So all in all, I'm really happy with how they turned out and how very different effects we can get depending upon what we're using for our mordant. So what do you think about that? I'm telling you, I really am impressed with how clear those prints came and how much definition we got, considering that we didn't get much of anything last week. So that just goes to show you, you gotta keep trying. If it doesn't succeed one time, just mix it up a little bit and try again. I am very happy with these results, and I will certainly be adding fern into my own creative practice when I do prints for things like my encaustic work. I love the effect. It is more neutral, and the color palette is in those warm, earthy tones, but the design and shape of ferns is just so interesting and compelling. So this is a wonderful way, if you have leaves that don't share much in the way of color, you can still do some magical things in order to enjoy their shape and some of the details that are just in their very fibrous makeup. So that means next week, I think I want to try this again. So what if we just walk through the garden and maybe try some of these things out in the steam using some of today's processes, and maybe we'll get some combination, including some color next time. So have a wonderful week, and I cannot wait to see you back in my garden soon.